Yesterday I spent a few hours on the phone with my cousin Kyle. We're not close or anything. We've never had much in common, but last week he posted on Facebook that he was watching some anime for the first time and really liked it. So I gave him a call and we geeked out for a while. Anyway, he's a real estate agent in New Jersey and he's been seeing some really strange stuff lately. I got his permission to describe it here. But he insisted I change a few details because he thinks there's some kind of cover-up going on and he really doesn't want a visit from the FBI at the rate things are going. I think he may not have a choice. It started 2 years ago. He'd gone under contract to sell a single-family home in the suburbs, completely normal house. To all appearances, about 11 years old, 2-story rambler. 4 bedrooms, big patio, white picket fence, 1-hour commute to Philly. Should have been an easy sale. The owners were even willing to drop the price to speed things along. But he assured them it wasn't necessary. Houses like these generally sell in 3 months or so. He said, sometimes a lot faster. He was sitting in the front room with a couple in their late 20s. Carrie and Sam looked like they belonged in a stock photo. Kyle mentioned to me a few times that they were better than average looking. I don't know why that was relevant, but I guess that's just the kind of thing he thinks about. They were as nervous as you'd expect them to be, considering that they were moving halfway across the world to chase a dream job. The contract was signed. He just needed to wrap up a few formalities. He'd done this 100 times. Do you mind if I show myself around? He asked. I've seen a lot of houses like this, so it shouldn't take long, just covering the bases. The couple looked at each other. Then Carrie asked, is there any way to avoid showing people the basement? There was an awkward pause. And then she added casually, I'd rather you didn't go down there either. Kyle chuckled. Is it unfinished? That could affect the price. Maybe by 20 or 30,000, but it's not something to get hung up on. The house will still sell. In fact, a lot of buyers see an unfinished basement as an opportunity. It's not that. He cocked his head and waited for an explanation. Water damage, demolition job gone wrong, hoarders. But it was several seconds before Carrie replied, I just don't think it will sell if we have to show the basement. Well, you've succeeded in making me curious. He shrugged. I don't think you'll be able to sell without a full walkthrough. There are places where people will buy sight unseen. But New Jersey suburbs don't have that kind of draw right now. And home buyers are the pickiest people you've ever met in your life. You know, I meet people who can't be bothered to wear matching socks, but they'll throw a fit over a pinhole or a paint scratch. If you tell them not to go downstairs, they'll raise hell until you let them. Finally, Sam spoke up. You're under contract now, right? Fine, come look at the basement. He got up and led Kyle down the stairs. The basement was run-of-the-mill. As far as he could tell, gray-white carpet, lightly textured walls, a hallway that led past a couple of bedrooms and a utility closet, and a living room at the far end, even to a real estate agent's practiced eye. It was perfectly normal, could have used a bit more light. Maybe, and it was a bit dusty, but run a vacuum through it and plug in a lamp and they'd be good to go. Sam flicked on the living room lights, then turned his back to the room. You go ahead and look, he said. I don't want to see it. What am I supposed to be seeing? Asked Kyle. The room was empty save for a couch, a desk, and a television mounted on the wall. He started to walk into the room, but Sam grabbed his arm and yanked him back. Just wait. Is it cockroaches? We can get an exterminator. I know a good. Wait. So he waited. He didn't see anything at first. Didn't hear anything either. Then he looked down at the floor, and his stomach took a hard left turn. Coming out of the exact center of the floor was a thin black spike. At its tip it must have been thinner than a needle. At its base it was barely thicker than a pencil. It was smooth from top to bottom, and so black it looked like a slick cut out of reality. Over the course of 10 seconds or so it extended nearly to the ceiling, rigid and silent the whole time. Then it retreated as quietly as it had come. It was gone for a few seconds and then rose out of the floor again. Kyle stared at it, watching it rise all the way up and then shrink back down again. What is it? Kyle said. Tears were welling up in Sam's eyes. I don't know. You didn't put it there. It showed up last month. We haven't slept since. That's the real reason we're moving. I took the first foreign job I could find. He took a deep breath. This is never gonna sell. Is it? Kyle was silent. For anything less than an otherworldly spike, he would have said no, offered some reassuring words. But something like this was more than just a deal breaker. It was a nightmare. They'd be lucky to find a prospect who wouldn't literally run out of the house. He tried furiously to rationalize what he was seeing. Faulty wiring, some kind of fungus, a rare crab or something. An old piece of rebar being pushed up by subterranean gases that built up and then released over and over again. None of that really made sense. But he'd prefer a nonsense explanation over some kind of eldritch tentacle. You have to kill it." Kyle heard the words before he even knew he was saying them. Sam stared at him. "Kill it?" Kyle nodded slowly. "Where's your garage?" Sam hesitantly led him back up the stairs and into a 2-car garage with gardening tools hung along the wall. Kyle grabbed an axe and headed back down to the basement, Sam following at a careful distance. He stood at the boundary of the room, eyes tracing the path of the spike, up and down. A sidebar about my cousin. He's never been in the military or police or anything like that, but he's definitely hard to face. I doubt the spike got more than a raised eyebrow out of him at first. That's just how he is. I remember when he was a teenager his family's house caught fire and he was the last one out. Everyone says he walked out the front door looking like he'd just woken up from a nap. Even giggled about it afterward. Dude's got nerves of steel. So I guess if you needed someone to exterminate an unspeakable evil in your basement, you could do a lot worse. At first he reached out with the axe and just prodded it, like a dead rat. Poke. It stopped moving immediately. Then a surge of thick black hair sprouted along its length and surged toward him like a horrible wave, completely enveloping the blade of the axe. He let go and scrambled back. The axe vanished into a sinewy bulge of black fibers, and then the hair retreated back into the spike. The axe was gone. Kyle felt his hand start to quiver. He looked down to see an angry red line across the back of it. The hair had touched him. An incredible jolt went through him as though a power line had fallen on his back. And after the jolt, an acidic rush as though every cell in his body were hissing and boiling all at the same time. He keeled over on the ground, mouth wide open, unable to get enough air in his lungs to scream. And as quickly as it had begun, it ended. Kyle caught his breath, shuddered a few times, and haltingly got back to his feet. Sam was frozen in his tracks, gaping at him. "Are you okay?" "I think so." Kyle studied his hand. The red mark was gone. "I don't think we should try to kill it." Kyle shook his head. Maybe that would have been game over for someone else. But damned if he was going down that easily. "No, now we definitely have to kill it." He left with barely another word. When he showed up the next morning on Carrie and Sam's doorstep, he was wearing thick elbow-length gloves, carrying a chainsaw in one hand and an overstuffed duffel bag in the other. Maybe it was ridiculous to go to these lengths for one client, but real estate was a cutthroat industry, and if you were the agent who was willing to destroy demonic entities for your clients, you were the one people would tell their friends about. That's what he told himself. But really, he was just pissed. At this point in the story, I could barely believe Kyle was still alive to tell me all this. And at the same time, I wasn't sure I believed any of it. I believe it now. He sent me a video. Sure, it might be a CGI prank or something. But why would Kyle go to the effort of hiring a CGI artist just to pull off a weird prank on his cousin he hasn't spoken to in years? The video is taken from his iPhone. He set up one of those claw stands on the back of the basement couch, started recording, and went to work. You can see the black spike going up and down. If you squint, you can convince yourself it's a video artifact or a trick of the light. But once it starts fighting back, there's no questioning it. First he comes at it with a baseball bat. He cocks the bat over his shoulder, and when the spike is fully extended, he swings hard. The bat hits. There's no sound at all. The spike doesn't give 1 inch. Then comes the hair, shooting out of the spike like thousands of matte black wires, consuming the bat and disappearing. Kyle's clearly expecting this and has already let go, jumping back to avoid the hair. Then out of the duffel bag comes a car battery with jumper cables in place over the electrodes. It looks like he's jury-rigged the alligator clips with long handles so he can put them in place from a distance. He slowly reaches them out, positions them, waits for the right moment, and lets them snap closed on the spike. It stops and does nothing for a few moments. I've rewatched this part a few times and I could swear the spike turns a different color when the voltage hits it. Still a shade of black, just slightly lighter. It doesn't seem to change the outcome, though. Still the hair comes out, consuming the entire circuit from cables to battery in an instant. Time for the chainsaw. Kyle starts it up and brings it to bear on the spike as coolly as if he were cutting down a stray sapling. The hair comes out, but noticeably slower this time. Kyle thinks the noise of the chainsaw was disrupting it somehow. He holds on just long enough to turn the blade and try to cut through the writhing mass of fibers. This is a mistake. A few of them latch onto one of his extra long gloves, and he freaks out for a moment trying to get his arm out of it. He succeeds and scrambles back an instant before the glove is lost forever. Every second of the video you're hoping he'll give up and go home. But that moment in particular seems like the last straw. If he hadn't been wearing that glove, the thing would have gotten his hand, maybe consumed him entirely. And now he doesn't have it. But he's got one more trick to try. 3 final objects come out of the duffel bag: a fire extinguisher, an acetylene tank, and a welding torch. When he lights up the torch, you can see a wicked gleam in his eye. That's the point where you start to wonder if the spike isn't over its head. He turns up the torch to maximum and reaches it out with one hand. The gloved hand, until the blue-white flame is perfectly centered on the spike, forking around it to one side and the other. At first there's no reaction. The spike goes down and back up again on its forever path. Then it spasms, a shudder that runs from base to tip and back again. Then it screams. A noise like 1,000 shovels dragged across 1,000 sidewalks. Then, for the first time, it bends. The top half of the spike lashes about, this way and that, as though desperately trying to find the source of the flame. It misses Kyle by a centimeter. He doesn't flinch. He handles the torch meticulously, careful to keep it centered on the spike as it flails. And finally it dies. One final scream shakes the room. You can see a little blood trickling from Kyle's nose. He says the screams were so loud he could feel them inside his body, pushing his organs backward as though he were going downhill on a roller coaster. The spike turns a dark blue and goes limp, falling on the ground like so much limp spaghetti. Kyle produces a Bowie knife and sets to work cutting the creature away from the floor. It doesn't appear to be easy going, but he keeps it taut with his gloved hand and saws away with the knife in the other, eventually managing to cut through it. His tools go back in the bag. The corpse goes in too. The recording ends. I watched the video 4 times. Each was more horrifying than the last. I was desperate to find some hint of green screen artifacts, a stray pixel, something to indicate that it was a fake, but I found nothing. I've deleted the video. I never want to see it again. Kyle says the house was a quick sell after that. He cut out and replaced the carpet where the spike was coming through. You can't tell it was ever there. He advised Carrie and Sam to keep their mouths shut about it, but it seems like they're not much good at secrets, because the next morning when he woke up he had a voicemail from someone named Francis, absolutely frantic about a spike in their basement. There were more of them, apparently a lot more. Kyle still calls himself a real estate agent, but he's basically changed careers. His website has a bunch of subtle clues in it, stuff in the meta tags, ways for people to find him if they know what to look for. On the landing page there's a picture of a for sale sign in someone's yard, but the post it's attached to is the spike, carefully cut from a frame of his video. In his bio he talks about Spike Lee in volleyball. His tagline says black mold, bad flooring, something odd in the basement. Kyle can sell it. If you've got a spike problem, you know right away what he's talking about. Otherwise, he just seems like a somewhat eccentric real estate agent. He says he's working overtime. I didn't ask how many spikes he's killed. He told me anyway. There are over 50 notches in his belt. He said sometimes he finds 2 spikes in one house. He's been stung a few more times. Stung, he says, as if they were just stray wasps, but it doesn't hurt as much anymore. I can't believe how casual he is about it. I asked him if he's seen a doctor lately. He brushed me off. He feels fine. Let me show you something, though, he said, and switched the call to FaceTime. The veins in his eyes have turned black. You might not notice if you weren't looking for it, but up close it's unmistakable. Jet black veins, from iris to eyelid. Weird, right, he says, and chuckles. He's pretty sure the spikes are spreading. He's had to drive as far as Allentown for a couple of them. Never has much trouble selling the house once the spike is out. The owners generally aren't in much of a mood to haggle. He's been burying the spikes around the edge of his property. A warning, he says, to anything that might be lurking underground. I don't think that's a good idea, but what do I know? Finally, we wrapped up the call. I haven't been the same since. Good God, Kyle is a different breed. I don't know whether to be scared for him or scared of him, and something tells me that one man isn't going to be able to contain the spikes forever. Not if they're spreading like he says. I may be several states away from New Jersey, but I'm thoroughly shaken. I haven't been down to the basement since we spoke. Maybe it's time to look for a foreign job.